So today's agenda, we're going to be going through, like I said, for anybody that just joined, leading remote and hybrid teams. So we'll go through just a quick intro. You guys know if you've been here before. We're going to talk about what it means to build really like a healthy accountability-based culture initially, since that's really important for leading in the remote world. And so really just 3 key tips around how you can do that and really set the tone as a leader. And so that's going to be around the in-person versus remote, talking about who and then how as well. And we'll get to some coming soon features and also some things that we just launched since our last webinar that we went over then. And then of course, IDS, throw your questions in the Q&A or in the chat area. We'll get to them throughout the session, or Mike will be populating our issues list for the end as well. Nice. So I'm Christine, head of client success here at 90. So I'm going to be taking you through, exactly how you would take these practices and actually implement them into the software using the different sections. And then we've got Jim here joining us as well.
Hi, everybody. And my role here is to help bring the perspective of practitioners, people that are out in the world doing this stuff, and and maybe some more coaching around it as well. What I'm seeing is best practice across all the coaches that I talk to and all the companies I talk to. And really, Christine, as much as I miss you, we haven't been in the same room for way too long, but I know we got something coming up in August. But I spent the last 2 months going and visiting as many of our employees as possible. And we have some more of that coming up this next month as we try to because doing the hard work of maintaining alignment and that sense of real trust when we're all remote. And we'll talk more about that, but I'm super excited about, all of the opportunities we have, because we get to focus and be intentional about the time we spend together. It makes it a little bit more special.
100%. And in addition to Jim and I, we've also got Mike in the chat and just gave a little wave. So whatever questions you have, he's going to be pulling them into the issues list or going ahead and sending you guys any resources right away in that chat.
Brilliant.
All right. So first up, when we think about being remote and considering what in-person events to have, I think the main thing that we want to make sure is building towards a culture of healthy accountability. And so we really think about this at 90 in 3 key main areas, which is having very transparent agreements, setting a very transparent direction, and having transparent communication. So that's really goes beyond just the individual team and takes it company-wide. Sometimes it has to start with a team. Sometimes some teams are better at some of these than others. But the main thing that we want to get to is getting the whole company on the same page with these. And the reason is, if you don't have one of these areas, you might find some negatives start popping up here or there. Like if you don't have transparent agreements, you're going to find like momentum gets really tough. If there's not that direction, you're going to have problems getting the right things done. And then, of course, for communication, it's going to lead to some misalignment and ultimately confusion across your departments.
Yeah, I love this slide, Christine, because it brings to head the reality that the natural state of things is no momentum, not getting the right things done, misalignment. Everyone that's got, we call that an accidental operating system where they haven't chosen an intentional one. That's where they get stuck. That's why they come to EOS or 90 or whatever operating system they end up choosing. It's really one of the things that really drives them there. And so, the point that I'll make repeatedly today is, it isn't that we have to work together in the same room to achieve these things. It's that we have to be intentional about these things when we don't have the room forcing us together. And that means we can also do it in the best, most healthy way and with the best focus.
Definitely. And in these areas, you're going to find like the 90 tools really like fit directly or squarely in there. So if you've implemented like the accountability chart, measurables, and meetings, maybe you're getting really great at that agreements portion. But if you haven't gotten to like some of those key VTO aspects or rocks, like the direction might be faltering. So you can almost think about these key pillars in terms of like what tools you're using in the system to help identify what areas you can start improving in. And I know a big one is that like feedback and process implementation. So the communication aspect, you might be having agreements and direction, but lacking in those if you haven't implemented those 2 tools. And of course, big circle around it all, because obviously everything is integrated and connected and very reliant on one another.
and it really, it starts from the top. This is culture. This is a culture of healthy accountability. It's really that's how we get there, how we make it resilient. Because there will be things that get in the way. There will be breakdowns that happen. There will be, team misalignments that happen. And if we've know how, as it, have the muscle, the internal muscle to know, oh, when that happens, we have to do this. And here's 12 things we can do to make it better. And I think reasserting the disciplines that go with each of these tools is a really important part of that. So I slide this one in to Christine, because I know for me, I was really, one of my favorite articles, those of you that follow Mark Abbott, our founder, his website, abbott.work, is so many great essays there, so much reading, a super smart guy. But one of the most important ones that I know that a lot of us coaches teach is this concept of the math of trust. That there is a specific math equation you can get to where it's your trust score is character times connections times competency. Character is a 1 or 0. If you either have character, you believe in the character of somebody, or you don't. If you don't, there's no chance of trust. So it's 1 or 0 to start out with. Then there's connections. How are you connected with this person? And that is, and it's not about how many molecules have we shared. Shout out to Sergey for that concept of, are we sharing molecules, or are we just looking at each other like on the Brady Bunch screen? But it developing the intentional connections, and then that sense of competency. Have I been clear with my expectations and clear with goals, so that I know that you are competent? I know you're working on the right things. You're going to do them well. But that connections are what keep me in that place where I can assume positive intent. Why don't you go ahead and start? Let's see. Yeah, and that's the real point here, Christine, is that remote work has exposed this. It's harder to get to high trust. And you have to be really intentional about making your connections. That connection part, that part in the middle, which we talk about as being a score of 0 to 100. That percentage, and then competency 0 to 100, and that's how you get to it. But leadership really requires connecting your team to the vision and culture. And we talk about that in our discussions on feedback. But you want to get feedback for your leaders on, are they connecting on this vision part, which is that being really clear on the direction of the organization. And then being really clear on intentions and feedback. Do I have a clear seat in the organization? Do I have measurables and process that I own as a result of that, so I know what I'm supposed to be doing and how I'm supposed to be doing it? All of these things give the kind of clarity that allow us to get to trust. But certainly, and then the other part of it is the cadence of all that. Clicking through is like making sure that we have this thought. When we saw it again at the SAS Academy this week, that this notion that staying perfectly connected is the concept that Genio came up with about the what he calls the meeting pulse. But it's not about not being disconnected, not being overlaid in some crazy way, but being perfectly connected. The right is partly about the consistent meeting and consistent agenda and having the right cadence, and it's going to vary depending on your situation. So the standard isn't, I have one weekly meeting and I have a quarterly meeting. That's a good place to start, but it's really about, do I feel perfectly connected? And know when you're not feeling perfectly connected, you've got to do something about it. And what we'll talk about today is all the things that we think you can do from a software perspective, and the disciplines that go into them that can get you back to that place where you're feeling high trust.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think the key thing here is setting that at the company level, and then letting teams still be autonomous enough where they say, like, well, this works for me and this works for this other team. You kind of have that standard that everybody's following. We're all on the same page, but making sure it works for each individual department is really key when you're talking about like that cadence and being perfectly connected.
Yeah, finger on the pulse. Am I paying attention? When you're a leader in the organization, your number one job is being a leader, building leaders, and you have to keep your finger on the pulse of how well it's working, how well that communication is working, how well those, we're being consistent with how we communicate and with how we're getting to clarity and trust. And you should be able to say, gosh, that sounds like we're not really trusting each other. Like we don't have a high trust thing. Now it's time to do something different about it. Now we maybe for a while we need to do and create this new cadence. Maybe not forever, but know that these are real problems that show up, and they show up when you're in the office building too, Christine. I mean, let's be clear. I mean, there are some things that don't happen. Like I don't know what you really look like. That doesn't happen when you're in the office building, but all these same kinds of things happen there. So this applies regardless of whether you're remote or not. In remote, we just have to be a little more sensitive to what can happen, because some individuals need it more than others too, Christine, right? So we've seen this, the people create the space where people can say, hey, I need some more time with my team. I need to feel more connected. It's like, that is a great call out, amen when Pimba can say that.
100%. And I think flows right into that next slide. Like, as leaders, like, you're really setting the tone. Like, what does your team specifically need? And like you said, you've got the finger on the pulse just to understand that and decide, like, what is your actual remote in-person cadence? Like, what works at the team and the personal level for each of those. So really setting up agreements based on like what meetings are happening, how are we doing those feedback conversations. So we'll talk about both of those as it relates to 90 and using the tool as well. But I think it's really important to decide. So like I put decide as the first word in each of these like three key main points, because it's like you have to make that decision and then make sure it's actually communicated across the board. So the second thing is like decide who owns what. So you need to make sure you've got the accountability chart set up. If you don't have that set up, people aren't going to know why their measurables are assigned to them. They're not going to know why their rocks are assigned to them in particular, or who's owning what across the company. And then deciding like how you work. So different than number 2, where it's like talking about tangibly what you're working on, but when things are getting done, like what's the expectations or agreements around like using Slack versus documenting things in Google Drive and the different systems that you're going to end up using as well.
That's right. I mean, there are a number of decisions that have to get made, and making sure that you're making them with the filter that we just offered, like staying perfectly connected and creating a high trust organization. I mean, I would, if I had to offer it down into haiku form, it would be, high trust, perfectly connected. Those are your filters to know when you got to do something, and then you have to make decisions about that. And these are really going to be testable theories. It's going to change over time, but as long as you're really watching for those 2 filters, are we perfectly connected, and are we building high trust? Then you'll know when it's like, oh, okay. I mean, that's your your pulse and your heartbeat, your pulse and your pulse ox, I guess it would be. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
it's a stretch. I got to work on that one.
And I love, Jim, you always bring up the concept of rituals and artifacts. And I think like thinking about this in terms of like embedding it into your culture and making sure you have those tangible things set up is just so important for making sure you're actually setting the tone in a way and communicating it to people.
It's, so much of what really works in any society, any culture, is about being intentional about your rituals, your artifacts, and your language. Like we give important things names. Their meaning is derived from the fact that we say that they're important, and then people will pay attention to them, and we reunite with that importance through our rituals. So it's a really high end, meta way of talking about it. But like, do we have weekly meetings? Do we have daily stand-ups? Who do I have a one-on-one with? And having guidance about those things, but understanding in your culture this works better. And if everyone is well aligned with your core values, then you do have a uniqueness to your culture that might dictate that we've got specific guidance on internally about when we do what things. And just having by setting up, hey, when you're starting to feel this, we do this. That just, if nothing else, it gives you a way of thinking about, oh, I'm starting to feel that thing we talk about, and now I know I got to do something about it. Because taking hard feelings in my meetings, or not talking about it till my quarterly conversation, or starting to back, when all those things are just cancerous, and it can happen more easily when you're in isolation.
Definitely. Yeah. And so I like I put tip, like 90 can help. Obviously, that's why we're having this conversation, but it's like all of this is very like theoretical, kind of like what you said, but I want to spend some time like bringing it down into the tangible and like talking about these things and using the software side by side with a lot of these different concepts to implement them.
Christine, and just as you're saying that, it really occurred to me, the reality is 90 was built to help with these things. Not only is can, but we want you to use it to solve these problems.
Yeah.
We want you to be more, productive, humane, and resilient, more, clearly focused. That's what we wanted. So, guys, that's what we built that into the tool. So if you're using it with all your might, you're going to get that out of it for sure.
100%. So when you're thinking about your remote versus your in-person cadence, I think it's important, like if you are all remote right now, to really think about tangibly, what are those opportunities where you should be connecting in person? And I think it's something where if you avoid this, it's going to show up in that culture. You're not going to have people connecting at the personal level as frequently as really they should be. So I know we use quarterly meetings for that. I know each team department has kind of been like, do you want to do it every quarter? You want to do it every other quarter? So like, again, you have the flexibility in there to do what works for individuals. But I think that looking at the new hires and then having like a full company like get together where there are people that are in different locations coming together and not just it being all about work is important for building that high trust organization.
Yeah, and the way I describe it to my clients, Christine, is that you want to build, experiences. I mean, people could draw out these connections often through experiences, not just like being, sitting next to each other in desks, but having an intentional experience. And what part of what I've been doing with my experiment the last couple of months is, as new hires come on, that's a perfect time to get them together with other team members, like as a way of initiating them. Maybe not their first week, but in that first quarter, we talk about, building that first rock for everybody, where their onboarding rock, where they're trying to get to the place where they're no longer feeling like they're new. That's a great one to embed into that some in-person time. That's a common thing that corporations have been doing for forever. Bring them into the headquarters, for a period during their onboarding, so they get to feel the culture, and doing the same thing. But now, if you don't have a place for them to go, but just knowing that that's still a thing that they should do. And as part of that, I know part of what we've been doing with our team is we've also been gathering people from around the area as well. So we've got another layer of cohorting. It's like, the St. Louis team and the Salt Lake City team and Michelle's going to start, we're giving them names. I think there's a push to make them all called meetups, but I think it's the regional roundup in St. Louis. That's what the locals decided to call it.
Yeah, I love that.
Michelle's going to do an Eastern Seaboard jamboree. That's what she's going to do. So, but having another way of connecting with people, not just my team members, because ultimately you still want to create those tentacles around your organization, those accidental meeting places. Heard a great story yesterday about the way that Pixar was built. They purposely had the technical stuff over here and the storytellers over here, but they built the building. They didn't do it the way you would want to maximize space inside a commercial building. All of the food and bathrooms were in a shared space, so they had to come together. And where I was with SAS Academy at Kelowna, there's a gentleman there who actually sold his business to Disney as well. That was part of Penguin Island
Club Penguin.
Club Penguin. Thank you.
Yeah.
And of course, and obviously, I was not in the right place to be at the right time to know about that one. But Club Penguin did really, really well, and they did the same thing. He built an incubator inside Kelowna to do exactly the same thing. There's a lot of empty space in the middle, just so you have those actually seeing each other. That's really valuable stuff, but you have to do it with intention, because if you just put a building up and everyone's got their own office space, it doesn't happen. So picking some places and just knowing going into this quarter, what are you going to try to do to get people together? It doesn't have to be super expensive, but having some kind of shared moment where some of your people get together creates that bond those binds them together in a way that makes the team more resilient, even if they don't have anything to do together from a work perspective.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I think it's it's okay and important to remember that it won't work perfectly every time. So like when
Right.
we did our in-person quarterly, I even put this in here, like lean on 90 in those like unique scenarios, I would say. So for our last quarterly meeting, one of our team members was like a month out from giving birth. She was really pregnant. So she didn't want to fly across the country, obviously, to come to our quarterly meeting. And we would by no means have expected her to do that. So we got a WeWork room. We all joined on our computers on Zoom. We all joined the meeting and ran it just like we were remote. A lot of us were in the same room, and you can set up that kind of hybrid environment that really works for everybody. And the same thing with like having formal quarterly conversations. That's just like a toggle in the software. When you turn on that formal aspect, I can show you right now, it lets you see each person's response side by side. So I think it's important to remember like these little tips and tricks when you are in a remote or in a hybrid environment, like make sure you're setting things up to work for whatever your situation may be. So this lets you see your responses and the other person side by side. So when we're on a Zoom conversation and we don't have like a printed piece of paper, it's a lot easier to talk about what's going on and seeing what each of us wrote down.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's trying to manage the experience. I know I've heard from a lot of coaches that have and implementers that have taken on the standard that either everyone's in the room or no one's in the room, or it's all Zoom, 100% Zoom, because everyone has to be here with the same experience for us to be able to manage that. We don't want anyone to feel a step back from the table. So that I know that's a really good standard. I've tried the OWL. When there's time for everyone to be there. I still think it's better. We're either all in the room at the same table or we're in Brady Bunch mode. So
yeah,
I gotta stop saying that because I know that's an old-fashioned reference, but we're all on Zoom together, all looking at the postage stamp size versions of ourselves.
Yeah, it helps that person that's not there like see facial interactions and like react to things. The OWL is just like all over the place. I feel like.
I mean it's cool tech, but it really doesn't do the thing we need to do, which is be able to create that emotional connection on the level that us as humans be able to read it, which is your inflections, tiny motions and stuff like that make us feel like we're getting more connected.
Yeah. So talking about who owns what, really across every team, like starting with the seats on the accountability chart, even if you already have this set up and you're not starting from scratch, I think it's so important to like bring awareness to the rest of your team to go look at those other departments and see how are they set up? What are their roles? Like that's just going to encourage like cross collaboration and people getting to know one another, whether they're a new hire or they've been here a while and you've just experienced growth. I think it's always important to make sure people not only know where the accountability chart is, but feel empowered to go look at things and reach out to people. When it's remote, I just know that's one thing that I've been experiencing lately. You have to encourage people to do that. Otherwise, they're just not going to think about it.
100%. It's been very interesting. We include that as part of our. We have a three 2-hour sessions where we take everybody that onboards through gym class, JIM class.
Yeah.
And I teach them about our operating system and how we use our tool for it. And one of the homework assignments is I say, here's the accountability chart. We look through everybody's accountability chart sheet. And quite often when they're coming through my class, they're not necessarily solid on that shit yet. And they don't necessarily have figured out the measurables for each of those roles responsibilities. So I said, okay, so for homework, you're going to meet with your whoever you're reporting to, and you're going to figure that stuff out, because that's going to give you real clarity for what you're really working on, how it's being measured, and how we think about success in that role. And you're going to bring back and we're going to talk about what you learned, and because it is that like there's so much of that where we don't know each other, especially when we get to the size we are now, where it's a much harder thing to keep track of. And but having people have a sense of it, so when they have a question, do they know who to go to? That's the filter there. Does everyone have an understanding of, gosh, if I want to know how something worked, who do I call? Is the accountability chart even part of what they think about as a reference to where to go? And right. I would agree. Most people know that's not the first place they go. They're gonna ask you, Michelle, or you Michelle, or you, Christine. Yeah, that's what they're gonna do.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. Like everybody doesn't realize to go there. And like you said, you're giving everyone that homework assignment. If they don't have measurables, they're going to their manager and figuring out what those are. And through that conversation, it's not just like, hey, track these things and put these numbers in the box. Like that's not helpful to them, but understanding the why behind it. Like I am looking at this because if this doesn't happen, our clients will experience that, or like somebody else on my team is going to be impacted, or even in my own role, maybe I'm tracking and making sure I have capacity week to week to do my job well. So I think knowing
Yeah.
the why behind the things that you're tracking is just like so much helpful context.
And here's the thing. I mean, you do have a My 90 page that has all of your measurables on it for your seats. And part of the value is that all your measurables have to be on a scorecard. So you're looking at them every week because that's where you should put in and make that one of your standards. This is where I'm putting in my measurables as a user. And that way I can add more scorecard items here. I can add more measurables here for all the things that I think I should be measuring. So even if you're, whoever you're reporting to didn't say, I should measure this. Hey, I think this is an important thing. This is the way I'm going to communicate my value at my next quarterly. I think I'm going to start measuring this. And there's so many things about that are really valuable because that's the very, very best way to turn expectations to agreements is when you actually start giving a number, can measure it. If we both agree that this is the right number of times this should happen every week, or this should be rising at this rate, or then that's what I've got success right there. Doesn't that become an opinion? The numbers speak volumes.
Definitely. So really encourage those people to go to their accountability chart, look at each role and responsibility and say, how am I going to measure success for this given thing? They can create a measurable for it that goes right onto their My 90 page. They can even connect that to their accountability chart seat. So when you select an owner, it's actually going to pull up the seat that they're on as well. If they're in multiple seats, you can choose which one it relates to. And then you have that second layer decision. Hey, if I'm tracking all these things to know if I'm performing or not, or knowing if I'm contributing to the team or not, I'm deciding what scorecards those belong on as well. So that's separate from my own personal scorecard, which can be like any number of things, up to the team scorecard, which is saying like, hey, these are the most important things at the team level.
Yeah, I mean, and we talk about one, same page meetings, that's just another team to put it on that you could be your scorecard.
Yeah. All right, and I just showed you how you would get that done in 90. Feel free to throw any questions in there if you have any. I know, little emoji.
I love that.
And then, of course, like we touched on this a bit, but like a clear picture of those responsibilities. So like when I went to the accountability chart, you're looking at each of those and understanding like what is the actual outcome, so that you can create the measurable. And then ultimately when you're deciding what rocks are at that quarterly meeting, those are also going to help you determine who's going to own what as well. And it's going to help with, as you're communicating and collaborating across departments and you're trying to get things done, who do I reach out to about this thing? You can assign milestones out to anybody in the company. It doesn't have to be just within your team. So if I go to the My 90 page, this isn't just going to be my own list of milestones. It's not going to be my own list of rocks. It's going to be milestones that are assigned to me no matter who the rock belongs to. So I think it's important to remember you should be communicating, collaborating across departments oftentimes with those rocks.
Yeah, it's a great way to think about how to build that connectivity between individuals when you're, because usually very few rocks fit just perfectly into one department. And the more valuable they are, the more likely they are to cross boundaries, and to create the opportunity, create the opening to force people to all take ownership of the parts of success in that rock is a great way to kind of jumpstart all that type of activity, and that working relationship and the alignment that comes with it. Yeah, I mean, it's so important to have that kind of opportunity to think about these things in the best way to get it done, not just in the silos that we might naturally come into.
100%. And I think it just gets back to that first point of when you know the accountability chart, you start to feel empowered to actually connect with those other people, communicate across departments, and all of that just has to be done so intentionally when you're remote, because you're not having those opportunities to run into people when you're going to get food or going wherever.
Yeah, and one of the things we teach, a lot of the coaching systems teach us, like we start with the end in mind. So if we think about the end as that quarterly conversation, like this is how, when I interview people, Christine, I take them through a quarterly conversation. Like this is what, at the end of your first 90 days, this is what it's going to look and feel like. So, this is really what it's going to be like. At the end of 90 days, if it's not working, this is how we're going to get there. So let me be really clear about that. So these are my really clear intentions. And we go through core values, and we go through the seats on the accountability chart, the roles and responsibilities, and we look at the measurables associated with those. We talk about those, what those might be, and this is how we're going to set goals for that. And we talk about what rocks you might take, quite purposely, because I want you to feel like this is, have a really clear understanding of, gosh, this is what's going to be expected of me. This is what success looks like. I'm going to be thrilled to have to experience that kind of success and to be by doing those things. If you're not thrilled about it, I'm going to know that. You're going to know that at the end of 90 days. And that's not work with the capital W. That's not the the higher order accomplishment that we're all hoping for each other.
Completely agree. And once you get beyond this, like who owns what, you start getting into like how that's actually being done. So really leaning on that communication aspect and the ritual, the artifacts, the language that your company is using, and translating that into what works for your team. So I know internally we're starting to think about like, what are our standard hours? Like there's people across different time zones. Let's like have set times of day where we know, hey, we're going to be available for meetings if we're working that day, and understand like things are going to come up. And if, look at each other's schedules and have access to those calendars. So you can put this information in your 90 profile, just in your bio area. So if you're traveling and you're going to be in a different time zone, just put a reminder there. I know we use Slack, so I can click on somebody's profile and live see what time zone they're in. So that's really helpful too. I think documentation is another big one, and process, I think, is just such an underutilized area of the system. And putting in here, not only just like, hey, here's how we hire, but getting into your different departments. Here's how we do a sales handoff. Here's how we go through our finance and our budgeting process. Anything like that that's standardized, you should really be thinking about, how can I create a core process around that and break that down into steps?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and a lot of and this is a good place to capture and point to your standards around the communication protocols that for how work is going to get done. What does it look like? I mean, for us, we don't control people's hours at all, but what does it look like to be online versus offline, and how do we communicate that? When we're in a meeting, what would be the reasons why you didn't have your camera on? There are not that many of them. What do you put in your profile so that when you're in the meeting, people can see about you? I think we decided we're going to add to ours in the partnership team what house at Hogwarts you'd be in.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
So Harry Potter is another required reading, it sounds like.
Yeah, well, it's being discussed right now. There's the new folks. There's a lot of reading so far.
Yeah.
Just the volume of reading is going to be required forever. Like, oh no, we'll probably back off a little bit, but not everyone has to be a big reader. We didn't make that requirement for the job. So
yeah,
well, the movies will do. You can watch them.
There we go. Completely forgot about that. And then another feature that I felt like deserves more attention is, I think everybody probably hopefully has their VTO set up. I think if you don't, throw in the chat and maybe we can talk a little bit more about what that process looks like for you. Oops, I should change to a different company. So with your VTO, you can share this with all of your teams, the leadership one in particular. So this is just so important, again, for like setting that transparent direction, getting everybody on the same page. When you toggle this over, it just means that each team can access your leadership team VTO. So it doesn't mean that marketing now can't set its own 3-year picture or 1-year goals. It just means they can toggle this option over and now see what the leadership team has put in for those options. It's not going to let them change anything or edit it. And a big concern is always that issues list. it's not going to share your issues list unless you specifically designate that an issue is public for everybody to see. So when I go,
important point that the default for new issues, for long-term issues, is off. It's not visible. So that way you're not going to accidentally say put someone's name somewhere where they're going to find it. Because that's a real concern. Or you're going to put numbers or data in there that you don't want to be public. So it defaults to off, it defaults to private. And just put things in there that you think everyone should see. Like, hey, I want everyone to know that these are things we're looking at and thinking about, and it's a great way to collect more insight from people, can help people stay connected to the long-term goals of the organization.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. There are issues where it's like, it'd be great for everybody to know that we're thinking about this, because maybe there's going to be ideas or things that can spark interest in other departments. But if there is any right people, right seed or anything that's a little bit more private, you can just be assured that when you are creating something from scratch, it's not going to be public unless you actually toggle that on specifically.
Yeah, I mean, and the toggles there, I mean, I want to point this out, is that, when the teams I coach, the toggle for the VTO, for sharing the VTO, Christine, is that sometimes you're working on things. Sometimes I know we're working on a feature where you can have a sandbox version of this, but if you're working on things and you're not really ready for public consumption, it's okay to turn it off. And it's really just, it's part of what you communicate, like, hey, if you can't see, all the parts of the leadership team VTO, it's because it's under construction. We're working on stuff right now. But by your quarterly, state of the company, you want to have it in a state where everyone can look at it. That's the one they're most likely going to reference it. But I also reference it. I pull it up, Christine, every time I do an interview. It's like, just make really clear, this is who we are.
Right.
We go right to it, man. And we share it all out. And so very, very few times have I been, but occasionally I am. I'm like, oh, leadership is not sharing right now. Not a problem. We do that for all the right reasons, because we don't want to communicate the wrong things.
Yeah. And I think a great point just got brought up in the question section too. Like, is the SWOT included in that? And it is. So thinking about like, hey, I do have these areas of weakness or threats or things that are like, hey, I don't want to communicate this yet. The SWOT is included in that share option. We're thinking about a way to pull that out specifically and make it private, just like you would with your issues list. So that's something that we're actively working on and thinking about the best way to do it, since it really falls into that same category.
Yeah, if you have suggestions on how specifically you'd like to use it, is it by element, like just like the issues, because that's kind of that's the right granularity, right, Christine? Is that we want it, we're thinking about ways from the interface perspective about how to make SWOT items align to 3-year and 1-year elements. And at what point is this going to be a concern, and should I make it public or private? I mean, I think it's probably where we land, right, Christine? Is like, by element, those elements need to be more like the 1-year goals and the 3-year picture, where you can put a lot in there, and what you do about it is probably as varied as the other ones.
Exactly. Yeah. And if anybody's interested in participating in any of this kind of research and feedback, we do have a product manager that's actively like reaching out and working with users right now, going through a sort of like interview process. So if you're interested, go ahead and throw your name or say like I'm in the chat area, and I can be sure to have somebody reach out to you and set up one of those interviews.
Yeah, it's a very, we get so much from that, and I mean, all of my suggestions, I come back to Christine. I don't take credit for them. They're all my clients. They say, yeah, but I want this, but I don't want that. It should work more like this. It's like, because I'm in it so deep already. That I'm not nearly as valuable until I'm doing it in front of a client, and then they ask questions like, oh yeah, good question.
Yeah. Great idea.
Yeah.
Best ideas from the clients.
Yeah.
All right. Well, finally, I've got a coming next in 90. So in order to lead more effective meetings that are beyond just that level 10, the quarterly, the annual that we already have set up, we are working on adding in custom meetings. So that would let you have any meeting type, like Jim mentioned, have his teams that have daily stand-ups running. Maybe you have a monthly meeting where like there's a special teams that's working through like a specific rock. whatever it is, letting you set up those custom meetings and having the agenda with whatever you need to be able to go through those is something that we're working on.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and that's an important one. Because we see once again that the discipline is from the inside of staying perfectly connected. What are the meetings we need to have? What are the standard meetings? And we see more and more people doing more and more different types of things. They need to, I want to have a standards. I know the one that we use in our team, Christine, is the morning stand up. Like,
Yeah.
And right now it just isn't the right shape. We can't really use the meeting tool to do it. And we sure would love to. So I can't wait for that one.
I know it's going to be great.
Yeah.
I know we even have the bi-weekly, twice a month meeting where we're talking about something and it's cross departments, and it's just like, it'd be great to be able to run that through 90 and not be restricted to some of those certain things. But
yeah,
I did want to
build that cadence into how we think about what happens inside the mix. So no, folks, we're thinking about that seriously and trying to understand what the best way to make that both effective and also simple enough people can use. So,
yes, exactly.
It's always a balance. Feature rich but simple. So.
Yeah. And I did want to bring up, I know we talked about scorecard before in this like trailing 4 and 13 week concept, so that you can understand your month over month and quarter over quarter data. Again, something that's just so helpful if you're remote, so it's easier to communicate with everybody. And we do have that out now. If you go to the settings area and into configuration, it's something that you can just go turn on. So go check it out in your account. You can toggle that on, and then goal forecasting is the next one, which allows you to set goals into the future. And so once you have both of those activated, all you would do is go to your data page and you can see each of those options within there. So you would get added this new tab, which you can go into and add your scorecard.
I mean, these are so important, Christine, because the scorecards are one of the harder things to collaborate around. The mistakes we see people making is there's too many numbers. I can't really see what's going on. I can't see trends. Or I don't, I come to the meeting and I haven't really reviewed it. It's not actionable. But the trailing 4 and trailing 13, it's great to take the bumpiness out of your number. That's the reason for that. If there's a lot of noise in your number, in your weekly number, but it's not really something you just want to report monthly. You can take that weekly look at it, but with all the noise taken out, right? And that's really the genius of it. And then we can all understand that much easier. So think about it. I want to have less cognitive distance, less work to do to understand the numbers. That's always the point. And same thing with the forecasting is being able to do some work someplace that helps people understand what's coming and how it's going to work, and what our plan is, and be able to effectively work on it inside a meeting. But instead of coming out of this and going into a spreadsheet, which most there's team members whose heads explode when you do that, right? And you're like, oh my God, now I have to kind of re-grok the whole thing. It's just, I don't really understand, the interface has changed so much. It doesn't look the same. Now I got to try to understand these numbers, and it makes it very difficult to participate fully in those things. So once again, the scorecards are always about simplicity, just the right number of numbers, not more numbers than you need, not every number, and having the right information in there, and including, which looks at both the forecast and what's your look backs, whether they're leading indicators or trailing indicators, and being able to look at them without the noise. So it takes some effort to get used to working with these, Christine. I mean, I think the thing that what I tell my clients is you can do this. You can create reminders inside the meetings as part of your agenda, like look at the trailing 4-13 week view. Look at the monthly numbers, and third week of the month, look at the monthly numbers. So set those things up in your meetings so you're actually reviewing these numbers and they're all top of mind. So because once again, it's part of your weekly meeting. It's about pulling out the issues that are in there so you're solving the most urgent, important things.
100%. And you're going to find each number, work with your team, figure out what's the best way to calculate these. There might be some that's like this active companies number where it's like, hey, 75, and maybe we're incrementally trying to get it up, but it's not going to be drastically changing week over week, versus maybe we've got our new leads number and we should be increasing that by 10 every single week. So we're going to hit X amount by the end of the quarter. And so maybe I would change this to say our quarterly goal, and then I can use the goal forecasting so that I'm incrementally like building it up until I get there by the end of the quarter. And I have
That's
more
it.
real-time feedback if I'm off track or not.
Yeah, and that it really solves a problem that people had. Is like, what do I make the goal when the goal is to, when the goal is for it to increase constantly. And both those things play in that. So setting up the goal forecasting so that even though the goal is the end of quarter goal, what is that in each of those weeks is where it needs to be on track for that. And then the trailing 4 and 13 weeks help, because if it's really bumpy, like, webinars are how I generate leads. And so I have a webinar, I have a bump, webinar, I have a bump. I mean, you can know that and go, oh yeah, but being able to have numbers that are actually, you can do something about, that's why what those tools are for. Hey, Linda was asking about wanted to see how to create a custom section of the meeting. Want to go ahead and do that? I think it's a great one, folks. I mean, custom meeting sections is a great way to set up to make sure meetings are really meaningful. It defaults to the way that Gino intended it, just these sections. 5 minutes for each of those things, 60 minutes for IDS. That is how it defaults to. But adding a custom section, and I love how pretty this new configuration is.
We just launched it last night, so I'm like, wow, Linda, great.
It's really beautiful. I'm gasping. So in here, so let's put in check monthly scorecard as a. So this is one that we do on my team. We have a check monthly scorecard. We put up right there, and I actually put in parentheses, first week. So week 1 of the month is when we'll go and check that. So we just know it just comes up. It comes up every time, and then you could actually put in the scorecard URL into that thing, so it does actually come up. So it just like it does in the meeting anyway for the scorecard, it still comes up. You do have to move over to the monthly tab though, Christine. So I'm sure someone's working on that. Like is there a landing page for the monthly tab?
Yes. Oh, I like that idea. Yeah, that's a great point. Since it'll just default to the weekly. Yeah.
Yeah, because that's the thing. So I think I suggested that folks recently for our process tool, and then we said, yeah, it's right here, Jim. It's like, so but because you can, in most of the places in 90, you can put you can put a URL as the content of the meeting, or as the content of the section, and that URL can be very specific to a very specific part of the tool. So but for right now, it would just be why don't you show them how to get that?
Yeah, actually you can. So
it does.
Yeah, so in your 90 account, if you do want to just automatically pull up the monthly section, just go to the data page, click on the monthly tab, so you'll see the URL changes to monthly, and then just go ahead and copy it and paste it in here. And what's going to happen is whenever you click on that specific section, it's just going to go ahead and
hit the check URL, because is it going to come up?
Yeah, it'll give you a little preview here.
Yeah, a little preview whenever.
There you go.
Go ahead and save that. So I think, Linda, I want you to love it. So I swear that didn't always work, Christine. So it's what happens when we got software that gets better every 2 weeks. So
yeah. Let's see, Kelly, it would be nice to, if you could schedule that meeting item to only come up on the certain. Yes, it definitely would. Yeah. So that is another opportunity, I think, especially when you have items like that. You're probably going to have another section that's like, hey, check the quarterly scorecard, first week of every.
Yeah. And just know that same process for when you're helping your department set this stuff up, they're all going to have in the business software that they're going to check as part of this. Like we look at HubSpot in the partnerships team, and I'm sure you're looking at Jira in development. So those things can come in line on the page, and you can like review that list, review that funnel or whatever it is, and generate issues from that. We can't pull all the context in we normally do, but you can actually, you're looking at it and say, okay, that's an issue, and which is half the battle.
Yeah, I think that's great. So yeah, thank you so much for that suggestion. I'll make sure we get that down. And then I know Linda also had another question around what we've seen people do in the segue section other than personal professional. I love Mike's idea, bring a joke. On the dev team, we had
that is so Mike.
Like a fun fact Friday kind of deal. So we had somebody bring a fun fact every week. I learned a lot of very cool things. So have you had any unique ones, Jim?
I have, and I do custom, for all my quarterly meetings with my clients, I don't use the common segues that are in there. I build a custom one for everyone. And so every time it's a little bit different, so they have the standard pieces, and then, something to really contemplate them, because I know where they're at too. I'm watching their numbers on, and I've usually talked to a couple of team members during the quarter. I talk to all my leadership teams more than I probably should, but to try to get that alignment, perfectly connected, being the outcome we're trying to get to. So
yeah,
love it. Bring a joke.
Nice. Yeah. So that's how you would go through and edit the agenda. Obviously, you can do that for every team. Your leadership team is probably the standard one. Like, you're probably not going to have very much deviation, but yeah, once you start getting into those departments, work with your team, decide how you can configure it, and make sure it's best for what you guys need. And then you can just close that down. And when you start your next team meeting, it'll all be there for you.
Yeah. It's good stuff. Good stuff.
There
it is.
Let's see if it worked.
I'm about to tell Michelle, because we have it, but I know it doesn't automatically go to the monthly scorecard for whatever reason.
I wonder if I forgot to save it or something. Anyway.
Yeah. Do save your work. Save your work. We all need to remember that.
Nice. And might include the help article. If you guys do have any other questions, feel free to throw them in there. Let's see what else I have in here. Yeah, so goal forecasting, we showed you guys that. So making sure you kind of enter goals ahead of time. I explained how we use it, like, hey, let's set the quarterly target, throw it in there so we can all see it, and then work incrementally up to that goal. It might work for some of your measurables, of course, not all of them.
Let's talk a little bit about all the ways to get the goal forecasting in there. So right now, you can put it in week by week, but I know we were working on like an upload feature for that. Is it just helpful at this point, or?
Yep. Yeah. So right now, if you want to enter them, you're entering them one by one. Same thing in the goal forecasting area. It makes it a little bit easier because you don't have to like click and save every single time. It just opens it up so you can enter the goals right away. So right now I'm entering goals, not actual, since I'm moving forward. And if you would like help uploading this information in bulk, like, hey, I've got all of this information, it's just on an Excel sheet, it's in this form, feel free to send it to us and we will go ahead and bulk update it for you.
Yeah, I think are smart measurables on in this version?
I don't know, but I can showcase them. We're almost
because we're putting more and more math that you could do actually in here without having to go to the spreadsheet. But I know that there's still things that I come up with. It's more important to have the perfect measurable than it is to make it easy to put it in. So
Right.
We get it. If you need to have a spreadsheet where things come from, this is about having it in the scorecards, about being able to share it and collaborate around it, not necessarily doing intense calculations, but we're making calculations easier and easier all the time, which I appreciate. And making it so you can pull data from other sources and making all that stuff easier. So you're really focused on the urgent, important things. I still always argue that it's best to touch your numbers, Christine. I'm an old fart that way, I guess.
Yeah.
You should know your numbers dead. It's like if I say to you, wake you up in the middle of the night, what's NPS this month? I know Christine knows.
Yes. Yeah. So if you do, this is probably not on in your account yet, but it is going to be turned on in the very near future. It essentially just lets you auto calculate scores. So if you've got like a sales lead and you want each individual team member to manually enter their number, so you still have that like very hands-on tangible approach like Jim mentioned, like that person knows what they're putting in, and then you still can get a sales total without having to like go through and then manually type things in. So it kind of gives you the best of both worlds in a lot of those scenarios.
Yeah, I still have one or two on my scorecard that I still have to get out my calculator for.
Yeah.
But that's because I'm it's like this one and then 4 weeks ago and over this. Yeah.
That gets a
a couple of versions away from that, but know that you don't. I mean, the most important thing here, folks, is that one, make sure you use the red, yellow, green, so it's really easy to tell what's going on. So so if you've got an escalating thing or something that changes seasonally, put the right numbers in here as your goals, and because it can be by week or by month or by quarter, the right goal, and then it'll go red, yellow, green appropriately. And whether it's because you put it in or you sent it to Helpful and they'll upload it for you. Either way, it's well worth it, because it makes that we're always looking for those little ways to win back more of our time, a little bit more of our attention, and taking advantage of the red, yellow, green is worth it. My clients that I've worked through, going through that extra effort, it's like, oh wow, every meeting feels better, because it just feels bad to look at a field of red, Christine. It just really does. And we don't need that energy early in the L10. We want good, positive green energy. And then when things are really off, you can see them. You can see, like, okay, that one's not working. Let's understand why. And now it really brings the focus and the attention in a great way.
Yeah, and I think it even ties like right back into that, like, really clear communication while you are remote. Like, don't be setting up measurable goals that are just like, oh yeah, it'd be great if we hit that. It's like, set it up so it's realistic. It's only red if it's an issue, and making sure like you're really disciplined around that. Just so, like you said, team morale isn't just like dipping because they're all seeing red, and it's like that was really just aspirational numbers.
If you as a leader have a team, when you allow them to have throwaway or easy measurables that don't really tell the story, that don't give you, insight about how the business is doing or what you have to do next, what you have to adjust. If you allow that, that's how everyone's going to look at numbers, and you are going to go way off track. I promise you. The more you discipline and you teach people the value, the confidence, the focus it gives you to have really good, solid numbers. Put that time in, my friends, because it even if you, especially if you hate it, because if you do it up front every quarter, like, really dig in, grin and bear it, just get the right numbers, and then the rest of the quarter you can breathe a sigh of relief, and every time you get your numbers, you know what they really mean. And I've had teams, and even on my team, I tell you, we've got numbers like, I don't trust the source of that number, man. We got to solve that. And it's just like a little dagger every time I look at it. Like, oh yeah. So
always a work in progress.
Always a work in progress, but it's the work that needs to be done.
Yeah. Well, that's all we've got for you. I think we actually got to all of the questions. We had some really good ones with Jessica asking about the VTO and sharing it out, talking through the SWOT and like seeing if we can make some future adjustments with making sure that's private, and then jumping into how we can customize meetings. I think all of those are really good for making sure that you guys can continue forward with those like communication, direction, and agreements.
Well, that Jessica asked about the VTO sharing, and I know this is a point. It's not always clear to my clients how it works. So the leadership team has control, and I think it's everyone in the leadership team has control over whether the leadership team's VTO is shareable, right? And that includes all the sections. So, but the thing that comes up if you're not in the leadership team, that comes up automatically is your department level VTO, which would include, if it's shared, the leadership team core values, a core focus, and 10-year target.
Yeah.
And then everything below that, you can have your team's marketing strategy. So and if you want, we can talk about that another time about what that might mean. But certainly, your team should have its own, your department should have its own 3-year goals, its own 1-year plan, and certainly its own rocks, because that is the sequence of things looking out into the future, as we go towards the achieving our ultimate goals. So but that's a natural state of things to look at, but whether it's available to that, and see there's that view leadership team VTO toggle up there, and if it's not shared, you won't see anything, but if it is shared, you'll see what the leadership team is sharing.
Yeah. And I know while we're kind of going through this like VTO exploration of like really what's missing here, how can we connect more things and just make things more clear, whether it's locking things down to be private or sharing more in the interest of like transparency. I would love to create more of a solution where I could just jump in and see what other teams VTOs are and understand like what are their departmental rocks, like how can I jump in and help. And it's going to be the same thing as the accountability chart where I know like what roles and responsibilities are. It'd be great to know like what's the company holistically working towards this quarter. And of course you have the company rocks, which you're sharing at the leadership team level, but I think there is that level of opportunity where maybe across your different departments, there's more that we can do in terms of like transparency and sharing there too.
Yeah, I've already had it come up, where we have, now we're at the size now where, end up, oh, there's 3 different departments working on the same, on their hand on the elephant version of the same rock. And it's like, all right, yeah, so let's someone's got to own coordinating all of this, and we'll all take milestones on it. Because that's really the point, is it's really, I don't need to have another rock. I just need to get these things, these things done in the end. And you do get scored in your quarterly conversation for all of the milestones that you did, because it's part of your to-dos. So you get full credit. It doesn't go on your permanent record, Christine.
Yeah, it doesn't go unnoticed mainly. Great. Well, are there any other questions? Anything else that we can talk through, help out with, feature ideas? Happy to chat, and also happy to get people connected with our product team to make sure that their feedback is like we're understanding your specific use cases and able to incorporate and push those into the software as well.
Well, one thing that occurs to me, Christine, we probably should, aside from these webinars, which are great ways to learn about what's coming up and what's new, is there is that the product update, which is, we don't send out to everybody to sign up for it, but there's a site, there's a page for that. Sign up for the product update, and you'll get. I mean, my recollection of it is, I get them, but it's what's coming and what's been released. They're both in there, including the documentation around it. Is that right?
Yep. So when we push out anything, we'll post it. If you sign up, so click this link and then put your email in, we'll send you the update of when things come out. So feel free to throw that in there. And it's a great way, just like be proactive, see what's coming up, and just get an understanding for where we're heading.
Yeah, I mean, it's good to have at least one person on your team that's signed up for that and probably attends these webinars on a more regular basis, because there is new stuff. It does get better every 2 weeks. It can be challenging to keep up on this stuff. And it isn't about you just keeping up on it. It's about, we're always putting in ways to accomplish what was intended with EOS, to get you further faster, to give you better alignment, to give you better visibility, all those things we talked about today. That is our goal. That is what we're building. So, I want you to utilize all these tools as soon as we have them ready, and your feedback on them is what makes them better. I mean, it really does. I mean, we hear it all the time. Christine, I know we had some great examples last week from customers and implementers going, man, I just love the fact that I make suggestions and you guys actually do it. So, but that's how we do it. We everybody in the field telling us what they need to be more successful. That's what makes the software.
Yeah, completely agree.
Okay, well, good. We're in violent agreement.
All right. Well, I don't know, Jessica, you asked about having to-dos that extend beyond a week, but aren't a rock quite at 90 days. I completely agree with what Mike put in there. Just create your to-do, give it a reasonable due date. If it's 2 weeks out or 3 weeks out, I know I have some that I just want to keep on my radar. I think the main thing is not putting it, 2 months out and not having like other tangible steps of how you're going to get there. And it's just going to like sit on your list and then become past due eventually. So keep awareness around it.
I mean, the way I teach it, Christine, is that listen, it's about managing human energy. That's what Gino says. That's what the system is really all about. So we make things rocks when it's going to take more than 2 weeks, because really we want to make sure we have agreement that that's a good use of the time of that person on the team. I'm going to take this rock to go through these things. I'll agree that that's an urgent, important thing, and getting that done is going to make us feel like we have a successful quarter. On the to-dos, we want you to get your to-dos done. And it used to be, when we're doing it on paper, it's like in 7 days. That was the point. But we want you to get your to-dos done 90% of the time on time. And this isn't just about, holding your feet to the fire. This is about helping us learn to predict, when can I get that done? And generating the right conversation, which is, hey, I can get that done this next week, but I'd have to push this off. Or I can get that done. I'd love to get that done, but I can't get to it until 3 weeks from now. Is that going to work for everybody? I mean, that's because that's the right conversation. That is that agreement on what's urgent and important in our priorities. And that's what really sets it up. So I'm going to take the due. It's due on this date. We all agree that makes sense. No, wait, I need to push it out this time. Like, oh, if that's the case, then maybe somebody else can do it because we got this other thing that's going to, and what a great conversation. That's a right conversation to have. And that's what we're hoping to get to. So definitely push those out where they belong, but do it in full disclosure with your team so that people can make decisions. Like, oh, I wanted to get to you said this was really important, so I did it, but I pushed off this other thing. Well, if you would have told me that was what was going to happen, I would have made a different decision. So,
exactly why we see them at the end of the meeting. You get a recap of your to-dos so you can see, man, did I take on 10 things in that meeting, and go ahead and adjust real time with everybody right here.
I got 50 things due in 7 days. Is that going to make sense? No. Let's figure that out. Okay, we got, to do is to figure out which to-dos you're going to get done. That sounds like a bad idea, but it's the conversation that we want.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Great.
Well, Christine, thanks so much. I think hopefully this was valuable to folks. We didn't get many questions in the specific, remote work world. Maybe we were just so clear and guided that everyone felt fulfilled. But
exactly, yeah. Couldn't possibly.
Hey guys, I added one question to the short-term issues list. Maybe I'm in the wrong meeting, but someone did have a question about right person, right seat being in the SWOT. I just wanted you to address if that is maybe not the place to put it since it has visibility. Could you touch base on that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, if you're working with a coach, definitely listen to your coach's guidance on this. But I understand that, right people, RPRS issues can definitely be any of those things, right? And you don't necessarily want to. It's great to have the SWOT as something that people can get to. It's a good resource for people to be able to do their quarterly planning and do their 3-year and 1-year plan. So that's why it's usually taught. Let's keep the RPRS issues in the private long-term issues. And then you can generalize it on the SWOT. So, losing key people. Like, this is one that I teach all my clients. It's like, you need to have a key player list. You need to have people that, I can't lose. You can't let anyone know who's on that list, except the leadership team should be really clear about who are the people that we really can, that it's a threat to lose. Make that list. If you haven't done that already, do that today. And make sure that you've got a program for making sure those people are engaged. You're going to give them a little bit more attention because you can't lose them. And that's a thing, and people are churning a lot. So, but that belongs on. So you can come up with a general thing on your threats list, like losing key players, right? And know that we got to look at that. And you probably remember that. Check on that every quarterly. That would be my guidance. Is every quarter ask yourself, who are my key players right now? Who can I not afford to lose? And then I'm going to have and someone's going to have a rock to create the program around what I do with my key players, but you're going to call something different because we're not going to tell anybody about Fight Club, Christine. And just use the tools for those purposes. So I understand the inclination to put it on the SWOT because it is actually more accurate to be able to put things on the SWOT, but it's, as we like to say, Christine, sometimes you can be more accurate and less useful.
Yes, that's a great phrase in this specific scenario. So yeah.
Hopefully that helps.
Yeah. Awesome.
Right. Not talking about Fight Club, Mike. No slacking about Fight Club either, Mike.
Whatever your preferred communication method is.
Right. Exactly. Great. Well, thanks everybody.
Yeah, appreciate everybody joining. Feel free to submit whatever topics you'd like discussed, and we'll talk to you next time.
Christine, I can't wait to go in and play with my meetings now. Like, customize my meetings. It's like, it looks gorgeous.
It looks so good. Thank McGregor.
Thanks, McGregor. Core value call out to McGregor for being awesome.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, guys. See ya.
Thanks, everybody. See you next time.